Liam Carter stepped out of his sleek black Rolls-Royce as the autumn breeze danced through the bustling streets of New York, his sharp blue eyes scanning the modest facade of Blake's Delights, a place far humbler than the extravagant venues he was accustomed to. Yet something about its warm glow intrigued him. The hand-painted sign, the aroma of fresh pastries wafting through the door, and the gentle clinking of dishes created a quaint charm that sharply contrasted his sterile boardrooms and penthouses. As the glass door chimed softly behind him, announcing his arrival, he adjusted his tailored charcoal suit, not expecting that, within these humble walls, his life would take an unexpected turn. Behind the counter, meticulously decorating a three-tiered vanilla cake, stood Sienna Blake, her honey blonde hair pulled into a casual bun, with a few rebellious strands framing her delicate face, her slender fingers moving gracefully with an artist's precision, while her emerald eyes shimmered with a depth that spoke of stories untold. Liam's breath caught momentarily, as if the universe itself paused, allowing him to fully absorb the vision before him. She was stunning, not in a loud, ostentatious way, but with a quiet, natural beauty that felt almost sacred amidst his world of artificial glamour. For a moment he forgot his purpose, his mind unexpectedly blank in the presence of someone so genuine, so different from the cold, calculated circles he floated in. Sienna looked up, sensing his gaze, and their eyes locked, an unspoken current flowing between them, charged yet unfamiliar, as though their souls recognized each other from some distant, forgotten lifetime. Liam's expression remained stoic, the usual armor of detachment firmly in place, but something in his chest stirred, a foreign ache of longing he hadn't felt in years. Sienna, meanwhile, registered the expensive watch, the designer shoes, the perfectly tailored suit, all markers of a man accustomed to power. But it was his eyes that caught her off guard. Not the cold indifference she expected, but a flicker of sadness, a whisper of loneliness that mirrored her own hidden scars. Despite her instincts to retreat, her voice remained steady as she greeted him with polite professionalism. "Welcome to Blake's Delights. How may I help you today?" Liam's voice, deep and smooth, carried both authority and a strange nervousness as he explained his mother's upcoming 60th birthday and the need for a custom cake worthy of New York's most elite guests. As she discussed flavors, designs, and intricate details, Sienna's passion for her craft shone through, her eyes lighting up as she described delicate sugar flowers, hand-painted gold accents, and silk-smooth fondant that would make the cake a masterpiece. Liam found himself unexpectedly captivated, not just by her beauty, but by the sincerity and love she poured into her work. Something rare in his transactional world, where everything had a price and everyone had an angle. The conversation flowed easily, sprinkled with faint smiles and stolen glances, each exchange weaving an invisible thread between two souls who carried silent burdens. For Sienna, it was the weight of a broken family, her father's disgrace, and years of struggle to build this small sanctuary where she could finally breathe. For Liam, it was the crushing expectations of a powerful mother, the absence of his father, and the gnawing emptiness beneath his gilded success. Neither spoke of their pain, yet it lingered in the space between their words, a quiet companion to their growing intrigue. As Liam placed the order and prepared to leave, his usual efficiency faltered, his steps hesitant as if reluctant to sever this unexpected connection. Sienna offered him a warm, genuine smile, her emerald eyes reflecting a glimmer of something she hadn't dared to feel in years. Hope. Stepping back into his car, Liam stole one last glance through the window, watching as she returned to her craft with graceful focus, completely unaware of the storm she had unknowingly awakened in his guarded heart. The engine purred to life, but his mind remained inside that bakery, haunted by the softness of her voice, the gentle curve of her smile, and the unspoken question lingering in the air. Why did one meeting with a stranger feel like destiny gently tapping on the door of his soul? As Liam drove away that night, the image of Sienna delicately crafting her pastries stayed burned in his mind like a haunting melody that refused to fade. Each memory of her emerald eyes and soft voice stirring something fragile inside him that he never knew existed. And though he had initially entered Blake's Delights with nothing but business intentions, He now found himself concocting reasons to return, each visit cloaked under the pretense of necessary clarifications for the cake, whether it was the shade of ivory for the fondant or the number of sugar roses. But beneath those convenient excuses was a growing hunger for her presence, a need to simply hear her voice, watch her graceful movements, and feel the calm that only seemed to exist in her orbit. While Sienna, though sensing his frequent returns were unnecessary, continued to greet him with the same polite professionalism, her heart cautiously observing the man who stood before her, torn between intrigue and self-preservation, for her life had long been shaped by betrayals that taught her never to trust too easily. She often caught herself studying him too closely, the perfectly styled dark waves of his hair, the way his blue eyes softened when she spoke, the occasional vulnerability peeking through his composed demeanor. And in those moments, she wondered what haunted him behind that flawless exterior. Yet she dared not ask, too aware of her own hidden wounds that pulsed beneath her carefully constructed facade. Memories of her past would sometimes surge forward uninvited. Her father's disgraceful departure after his financial crimes destroyed their family. The whispers of shame from neighbors. The cold betrayal of Vanessa, her childhood best friend who spread venomous lies that left Sienna ostracized, alone, and forced to rebuild her life brick by fragile brick. Each pastry she baked becoming both her therapy and her survival. Liam sensed her guarded distance, but couldn't pull himself away, drawn to her resilience, her silent strength that stood in sharp contrast to the polished but empty women he typically encountered in his world of calculated deals and hollow conversations. The more he visited, the more he found himself sharing fragments of his own pain during their quiet exchanges, revealing how his father's cold abandonment left him under the iron grip of his powerful mother Evelyn, a woman who demanded perfection and viewed emotions as weakness, forcing Liam to build his empire not out of passion but out of obligation, as if his achievements could somehow fill the void left by the father who vanished without a trace. One stormy evening, the sky wept with heavy rain as Liam once again found himself at Blake's Delights under the guise of finalizing cake details. But when the storm knocked out the power, plunging the bakery into a soft candlelit glow, neither of them made any attempt to leave, and in that fragile silence the walls between them began to dissolve. As the wind howled and raindrops lashed against the windows, Liam's voice wavered slightly when he spoke, his confession hanging heavy in the warm air as he admitted how hollow his victories often felt, how the boardrooms filled with applause left him emptier than ever, and how every business deal seemed to only widen the distance between himself and the meaning he secretly yearned for, while Sienna listened with unspoken empathy, recognizing the loneliness behind his carefully chosen words because she too had walked the bitter path of isolation. And though her instincts screamed to keep her heart locked, she felt something shift inside her, a small, dangerous seed of trust beginning to take root. Their eyes met across the flickering candlelight, and in that suspended moment, time blurred, as though the universe paused once again, witnessing two fractured souls reaching tentatively for something neither dared name. Yet far beyond the warm sanctuary of the bakery, shadows stirred as Bradley Hunter, Liam's sharp-eyed business partner, began noticing his friend's strange absences. The meetings rescheduled, the subtle distractions, and behind his calculated smile, Bradley saw not harmless infatuation, but an opportunity to exploit, to weaken Liam by targeting the woman who had unknowingly become his soft spot. Simultaneously, Vanessa Collins, forever bitter and hungry for relevance, caught wind of Sienna's growing connection to New York's most eligible billionaire, and jealousy, as venomous as it was swift, flooded her veins with dark delight at the possibility of dragging Sienna back into the pit of humiliation she thought she had escaped. As the storm outside finally softened into a steady drizzle, Liam gently reached for Sienna's hand resting on the countertop, his touch tentative yet sincere, and though her breath caught at the unexpected contact, she did not pull away, feeling for the first time in years the terrifying warmth of possibility, as though both of them stood on the precipice of something fragile, dangerous, and impossibly beautiful. Even as unseen forces plotted to tear them apart before the fragile bloom of trust could fully unfold. The delicate warmth that had begun to bloom between Liam and Sienna now stood on the edge of a precipice neither of them could have foreseen. For while they quietly held on to the fragile threads of connection in that dim candlelit bakery, darkness wove its own web in the shadows they could not see. As Bradley, whose calculating eyes had long monitored Liam's every move, grew increasingly unsettled by the vulnerability seeping into his partner's usually impenetrable armor. Recognizing that love, even in its earliest whispers, could unmake the sharp, focused mind that built Carter Enterprises into an empire. He needed leverage, and in his hunt for weakness, Bradley sought out Vanessa Collins, whose desperate hunger for relevance left her prime for manipulation, her social media following dwindling as her fleeting fame slipped through her perfectly manicured fingers like sand. And when Bradley approached her with the offer, laced in venomous opportunity, Vanessa's eyes lit with cruel satisfaction. Her old jealousy toward Sienna rekindled like a dormant fire finally fed fresh oxygen. They plotted meticulously, exchanging information like currency, and Vanessa, her lips curled into a practiced mask of concern, made her move, intercepting Liam one morning as he exited his high-rise office, her voice dripping with feigned sincerity as she gently grasped his arm, her gaze filled with counterfeit compassion, whispering words designed to slice through his trust like a razor. Liam, I didn't want to get involved, but you don't know who she really is. She's hiding things from you, things you deserve to know. Her father was a fraudster. She's using you, manipulating your kindness for her own gain. And though Liam's features remained stoic, her words planted cruel seeds of doubt that immediately began to sprout like poisonous vines wrapping around his heart. As Vanessa's words echoed in his mind, Liam wrestled with an internal war more violent than any boardroom battle he had ever fought, torn between the purity of what he felt and the haunting caution engraved into him by years of betrayal and control, his heart screaming against his mind's cold logic. Unable to carry the weight of uncertainty any longer, Liam found himself standing once more in the comforting glow of Blake's delights that evening. But the air inside felt different, heavier, as though fate itself was holding its breath. Sienna sensed the shift instantly when their eyes met, the softness replaced by a storm brewing behind his blue gaze. And though his voice was steady, it trembled beneath the surface as he finally spoke, his words sharp with pain but void of accusation. Is it true? Your father? Your past? Words that struck Sienna like an unexpected slap, forcing old wounds to bleed anew. And for a brief moment, the room spun as the nightmare she thought she had long buried resurfaced with ruthless force. Her breath caught as she struggled to steady herself, tears pooling in her emerald eyes as her voice cracked under the weight of her truth. Yes, Liam. My father was arrested when I was 16. He made choices that destroyed my family. But I am not him. I am not his sins, Liam. Everything you see, everything I built from ashes, alone. Her confession raw, her hands trembling as though holding her heart out for him to judge. But as the words hung between them, Liam's silence grew heavier, not with anger, but with paralyzing uncertainty, his stillness slicing through Sienna's chest far more painfully than any outburst could have, his face caught in a battle between reason and feeling, between fear and faith, while Sienna's tears finally slipped free, streaking down her cheeks like tiny rivers of anguish, her voice dropping to a trembling whisper that carried the weight of every rejection she had ever endured. If you can't see who I am beyond my scar, then you never really saw me at all, her words slicing into the hollow space where hope had dared to live. Liam's chest tightened, his throat constricting, as the air grew suffocatingly thick. But without another word, he turned away, the echo of his departure crashing louder than any scream, leaving behind not just the scent of warm vanilla and sugar, but the woman who had unknowingly begun to stitch together the shattered pieces of his guarded soul. And as the door closed behind him, the flicker of candlelight seemed dimmer, as though reflecting the emptiness left in his wake, while Sienna stood frozen in the quiet devastation, her heart bleeding silently into the shadows of the bakery that once held the promise of something beautiful, now tainted by the cruel sting of doubt. The hours turned into days, but the ache inside Liam's chest refused to fade. growing heavier with every breath as he buried himself in board meetings, investment calls, and endless paperwork, using the cold comfort of routine as a shield against the hollow emptiness that gnawed at him from within, while his mind involuntarily replayed Sienna's trembling voice and tear-streaked face like a cruel loop he couldn't escape. Meanwhile, across town, Sienna moved through her days like a ghost inhabiting her own life, forcing herself to bake, to serve customers, to smile through the agony that twisted her stomach, determined not to let heartbreak devour the fragile world she had fought so hard to build, even as her soul screamed beneath the weight of the silence Liam had left behind. Yet while both of them struggled privately, Bradley's venomous scheme had not yet reached its final blow, for he had orchestrated one last act of cruelty designed to publicly sever the growing bond that threatened his grip on Liam, carefully selecting Evelyn Carter's grand 60th birthday gala as the perfect stage for his masterpiece of humiliation. The night arrived in dazzling opulence. Crystal chandeliers glittered like frozen stars above the glittering crowd of New York's elite, their designer gowns and tailored tuxedos blending into a sea of power and vanity as orchestral music swirled through the lavish ballroom. But beneath the surface elegance, treachery pulsed like a hidden current. Sienna, who had bravely agreed to attend after much persuasion from mutual acquaintances, walked into the grand hall wearing a simple but elegant midnight blue gown, her head held high despite the knots twisting inside her stomach, her every step a quiet act of defiance against the judgmental eyes already whispering behind their champagne flutes. While Liam, standing across the room, couldn't take his eyes off her, his heart pounding with equal parts awe and guilt, tormented by the haunting echo of his own silence. Then, as Evelyn stepped onto the stage to give her celebratory speech, the lights flickered momentarily, and in that brief glitch, Bradley's planted trap sprang to life. Suddenly, without warning, enormous screens illuminated with grainy black and white photographs of Sienna's father being handcuffed, reporters swarming, police lights flashing as the shocking images of scandal and disgrace filled the ballroom, drawing sharp gasps and audible whispers from the horrified guests. Evelyn's face twisted in disgust as she hissed beneath her breath, her voice like ice slicing through Liam's spine. "I warned you about associating with filth," her judgment wrapping itself around him like barbed wire as all eyes turned toward Sienna, who stood frozen, her breath shallow as waves of shame threatened to drown her right there beneath the blinding spotlight. But at that moment, something inside Liam shattered. Not the fragile cracks of uncertainty, but the cold walls of fear and pride he had clung to for too long. And in their place surged a clarity that burned brighter than the chandeliers above, for he finally saw the cruelty of this world and the strength it took for Sienna to stand tall despite its relentless attempts to crush her. Stepping forward with sudden conviction, he seized the microphone from the podium, his voice ringing out steady and sharp, slicing through the heavy air as he addressed the sea of judgmental faces. "This woman you seek to shame, she's stronger than any of us here," his words fierce with both fury and reverence. "And if anyone should feel ashamed tonight, it's those who dare judge a daughter for the sins of her father. For she built her life not with privilege, but with resilience. None of you can even comprehend." His gaze sweeping across the silent, stunned crowd as Evelyn's glare burned into him, while Bradley's satisfied smirk finally faltered, the man realizing his plan had backfired in the most spectacular way. Liam's voice softened as he turned his full attention to Sienna, his ocean blue eyes glistening with unspoken regret as he whispered into the microphone, "Forgive me, if you still can," his words carrying not just an apology, but the weight of his heart finally laid bare for the world to witness. The room fell into a breathless hush, every soul holding its breath as all eyes locked onto Sienna, waiting for her response. But instead of words, she offered only silence, a silence that roared louder than any rejection. Her chin lifted with quiet dignity as she turned gracefully and walked away from the stage. From the cameras, from him, her steady steps echoing like thunder in the marble hall as the crowd parted to let her pass, their judgment replaced now by stunned awe at the strength radiating from the woman they had sought to break. While Liam stood frozen beneath the shimmering chandeliers, his heart hollow yet strangely full of clarity. Knowing he had lost her, for now, but finally understanding the depth of the woman he had nearly allowed the world to destroy. The days turned into long, empty corridors of time, each moment heavy with the ache of absence as Liam wandered through his world, now void of color without Sienna's presence, his once vibrant empire feeling hollow beneath the weight of regret that gnawed at his soul. He tried desperately to bridge the chasm he had created. His calls went unanswered, his heartfelt letters remained unopened, and the lavish bouquets that once dazzled now sat untouched in the small corner of her bakery, their petals slowly withering like the distance growing between them. While Sienna, though equally broken, clung to the fragile walls she had built around her heart, terrified that to let him in again was to risk another shattering. Yet fate had its own quiet patience, and one evening, as the city surrendered to winter's gentle embrace, snowflakes floating like tiny whispers from heaven, Sienna returned to her bakery after closing only to find Liam standing outside beneath the falling snow, his dark coat soaked, his once perfect hair clinging to his forehead, and in his trembling hands he held a small, lopsided cake, its uneven frosting a humble symbol of his vulnerability. As she approached, their eyes met, hers guarded, his pleading, and with a soft, sheepish smile, Liam broke the silence, his voice tender and raw. "I failed miserably, but I thought, maybe you could teach me," the sincerity behind his words slicing through her defenses like sunlight piercing through storm clouds. For a moment she hesitated, but then, moved by the raw honesty in his gaze, she quietly unlocked the door and stepped aside, allowing him to enter not just her bakery, but her guarded world once more. Inside, the warm amber glow of the kitchen wrapped around them like a protective cocoon, and as they stood side by side at the counter, their hands coated in flour, laughter gradually bubbled between them, softening the jagged edges of past wounds as they kneaded dough, the simple rhythm of baking becoming a dance of healing. Their shoulders brushed, his gentle touches deliberate yet cautious, testing the fragile ground between forgiveness and hope. And when his hand finally grazed hers, a spark leapt between their skin, electrifying the air as both their breaths caught in unison, the unspoken emotions swirling around them like the snowflakes outside. Then, with his voice barely above a whisper, but filled with unwavering conviction, Liam spoke, his blue eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "I've hurt you, Sienna, but I promise, from this moment on, my only purpose is to protect that heart." His words a solemn vow that trembled beneath the weight of its own truth. Sienna's emerald eyes welled, though this time not with sorrow, but with a warmth that melted the icy fear she had carried for so long. And as her lips curved into a soft, trembling smile, she whispered back, "Then let's start from scratch," her voice carrying both forgiveness and a fragile hope for something beautifully new. In that moment, as the snow outside danced against the windows like tiny blessings from fate, their lips met in a kiss that was tender and deliberate, a gentle weaving of apology, promise, and rebirth, sealing a chapter of pain and opening one of healing beneath the quiet hum of the city blanketed in winter's embrace. As the fragile peace between them blossomed like spring after a brutal winter, neither Sienna nor Liam realized that in the shadows, Bradley's venom was coiling for one last strike, his desperation growing as his manipulations slipped further from his grasp. His envy, once quiet, had now turned into a storm of malice as he carefully forged damning documents implicating Sienna in financial crimes she had never even dreamed of committing, painting her as a calculating woman who had faked love and forged financial statements to entrap Liam for his fortune. When the authorities arrived at her bakery one cold morning, their flashing lights slicing through the calm like knives, Sienna's world tilted violently once more, her wrists quickly encircled by cold steel as the officers read charges she could barely comprehend, her heart pounding in terror, while patrons and neighbors watched in stunned horror, whispers igniting like wildfire as her reputation threatened to shatter all over again. But unlike before, she wasn't alone. Liam arrived almost instantly, his expression fierce and unyielding. his voice slicing through the chaos as he demanded the officers stand down. His legal team presenting carefully gathered evidence that had been collected by the private investigator he'd hired weeks ago, suspecting Bradley's manipulations long before this final trap was sprung. The courtroom of public opinion shifted as real headlines broke across every news network. Billionaire's partner arrested in scandalous fraud scheme, accompanied by leaked video footage, wire transfers, and recorded conversations that exposed Bradley's vast network of embezzlement, blackmail, and betrayal, leaving no doubt of his guilt. As officers cuffed and dragged Bradley out of the bakery, the defeated man locked eyes with Liam, his voice dripping with venom as he hissed, "You can't save everyone, Carter," a final bitter attempt to claw at Liam's resolve. But Liam, unwavering, squeezed Sienna's hand gently, his voice calm yet unshakable, as he replied, "I only need to save the one who saved me," his words carrying the weight of devotion that even Bradley's poison couldn't taint. Standing nearby, Evelyn Carter, who had watched the entire scene unfold with growing discomfort, finally stepped forward, her voice uncharacteristically soft as she glanced at Sienna, truly seeing her for the first time beyond the prejudices that had once clouded her judgment, and whispered with a rare hint of humility, "Perhaps I misjudged you." Her words tentative but sincere, acknowledging the grace and strength Sienna had displayed through storms most couldn't endure. As Bradley disappeared into the flashing lights of waiting police cars, the heavy clouds that had loomed for so long finally began to scatter, sunlight breaking through the once dark skies like hope reborn, bathing the city in a golden warmth that felt almost like fate's gentle approval, signaling that the storm had, at last, been broken, and a new chapter was ready to be written. As spring quietly arrived and painted the city with soft pastels, months had passed since the storm had broken, and in that time, Liam and Sienna's love had not only survived, but flourished, growing roots far deeper than either of them had ever imagined possible, nourished by the trials they had overcome together. The bakery, once a sanctuary of solitude for Sienna, now stood as a symbol of redemption and shared dreams, its cozy walls echoing with laughter, warm conversations, and a harmony that felt like home. Liam, who once lived within the sterile walls of corporate boardrooms and hollow social events, had found a rhythm in the simple joys of their daily life, kneading dough beside her, serving customers, learning the delicate art of pastries with clumsy hands but a devoted heart, and in every small moment, falling more deeply in love with the woman who had transformed his world. He watched her under the golden morning light as she decorated cakes, her graceful hands dancing across the surface like an artist, painting her soul onto every creation, her emerald eyes glowing with quiet contentment. And in those moments, Liam knew he had found what his billions could never buy: peace, purpose, and a love that mended even the deepest wounds. As the cherry blossoms burst into full bloom across the city's parks, Liam carefully planned the moment he had long dreamt of, choosing not the grandeur of wealth, but the humble bakery where their journey had begun, where pain first collided with possibility. Beneath a gentle shower of pink petals swirling like confetti from nature itself, he led Sienna to the small corner of the bakery where they had first locked eyes that fateful day, his heartbeat thundering beneath his tailored suit, not from nerves, but from overwhelming gratitude that fate had led him here. As she turned to face him, her soft smile reflecting both the scars and strength they shared, Liam dropped to one knee, producing a simple yet elegant ring that sparkled under the soft afternoon sun. And with a voice rich with emotion, he spoke words etched from the depths of his soul. "Not because you're perfect, but because you're real. And you make me whole." His voice catching slightly as his blue eyes glistened with tears that mirrored the raw sincerity of his heart. Sienna, her breath stolen by the magnitude of the moment, felt tears pooling in her eyes, shimmering like tiny diamonds against her flushed cheeks as she whispered through her joyful sobs, "Yes, Liam, 1,000 times. Yes." Her voice trembling under the weight of profound happiness, sealing a promise that had been forged in fire and softened in forgiveness. Their wedding followed weeks later, not as a grand spectacle for headlines, but as an intimate gathering of true friends, family, and those who had stood by them when the world sought to tear them apart. The ceremony held in a garden adorned with cascading flowers and soft candlelight that bathed everything in a glow that felt almost otherworldly. Even Evelyn Carter, once hardened by judgment and pride, now stood with genuine warmth in her eyes, offering Sienna not just acceptance, but a silent apology wrapped in her gentle embrace, finally recognizing the extraordinary woman her son had chosen. The vows exchanged that evening were not just words, but the culmination of every tear shed, every battle fought, and every fear conquered. And as Liam whispered on their wedding night, holding Sienna close beneath the soft glow of the moon, his words were a quiet anthem of their journey. From broken hearts, we built an empire of love. And with those words, they drifted into a peace neither had known before. Outside, under the velvety night sky, the newly designed bakery sign gleamed proudly. Carter and Blake Delights, where sweetness is forged from ashes, a testament to the love story that had risen from despair, transforming not only their lives, but offering hope to every soul who walked through their doors, seeking comfort not just in pastries, but in the quiet reminder that even the most shattered hearts can be made whole again.